Spooky Interviews from Spooky Ventures. This edition, Joseph A. Federico. Would you like to introduce the viewers to your spooky work?
Hello everybody, I'm Joseph A. Federico, author of Voodoo Juice that was released in 2017. A little history behind the book before we get started with the interview. I began writing the book in 2012 on the shores of North Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. I had a wonderful cocktail with the same name, Voodoo Juice, at the Crow's Nest at Ocean Creek Resort and Plantation in North Myrtle Beach. And I decided to write a historic-esque thriller novel that year. It only came out during the summer, and that was my summer project. I only worked on it, it had summer vibes, and it took place originally in Myrtle Beach in the 90s. I wrote out the characters, I flushed through scenes and character names, and it didn't really resonate with me until I went to New Orleans in 2014 with my best friend, Melinda, who's also my friend and manager, and my muse. She's also a character in the book. And I went to a club called Oz off of Bourbon Street. And of course, you're in New Orleans, you're feeling mighty fine. And I was feeling extremely fine. We were wearing beads, I was wearing a mask, and it was October of 2014 that I decided to change up the entire book of what it is now. It is now set in New Orleans in the 18th century and 2014 New Orleans, and there is a lot of horror that takes place on Bourbon Street around the Mardi Gras season. So this book is not only for Mardi Gras, not just for summertime, although all those seasons and holidays, especially in the South, are noted within, but it's also a fantastic book for Halloween. So I, was wearing my mask, we were dressed up, dancing, lights, music, camera, action, and this whole new story came to me in 2014. So it evolved. I came back about 4.5 days later, not knowing what even happened to me because it was such a whirlwind of experience, the Southern hospitality and music and flair and meeting new people that inspired me to write full-time and to get the manuscript completed. So that is, again, what I now call Voodoo Juice. It is available through me personally for $20 currently through Halloween, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the interview. Thank you.
You got to do a book signing in the old French Opera House in New Orleans. That place has quite a history. What was that experience like?
Yes, I did have a great experience at the old French Opera House, which now operates as the Four Points by Sheridan in the French Quarter, right on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, Louisiana. So I had the opportunity around this time last year, October 2018, around Halloween, a few days before Halloween actually, to have a book signing. And it was fantastic. The staff, again, if you are viewing, those who worked there and currently work there, I want to thank you again for your hospitality. It was a dream bringing my book that had originally started to take shape in the Carolinas, really gain its momentum and its oomph and its soul in New Orleans. I truly believe that. So thank you very much again. So I went there. It was 11 to 2, I believe, Central Standard Time, and my friend, who I had just mentioned, Melinda, my friend, manager, and muse, who's also in the book, and I'll speak about this, to this later, but she's also a character, one of the main characters in Origins that comes out 2020. She turned to me and she said, "Do you hear that?" I said, "No." Now this is about halfway from the end time. So I walked over to her and I said, "Well, what's wrong? What are you hearing, experiencing?" And she said, "There's a crackling like a paper or like a fire starting. Something is wrong. Like I'm not feeling okay around this corner." I said, "Okay." I stepped toward it. She said, "It stopped because you're next to it." I freaked out. I walked back. She said, it started again because you're gone. So this happened, took place between 2 and 5 minutes of our time. I took pictures because I'm an avid, ghost. I guess I will, self-title myself a ghost researcher. I love all things spooky. I write about death and travesty and horror and history all combined into, words and literature. So I was taking pictures to try to get proof of a spirit possibly being in that area. Absolutely nothing. So we wrapped up our, time there. I thanked the staff again, took pictures, left for some beer to go celebrate, have fun, explore the Garden District and beyond. So we went to a brewery and we were there for a few hours, touring actually a few of them in the area. And this was, I believe, a Tuesday. And it was vacation for us, but it was not for the rest of New Orleans. So, we wanted to go back to our hotel, which was the Maison Dupuis, and we couldn't get an Uber home. It was raining. We didn't want to walk. It was too far to walk. We would have gotten wet, sick, mind you. And we finally got an Uber driver that came within 2 to 3 minutes. Everything happens for a reason, I believe. And the driver said, "Oh, how was your day?" Of course, we're feeling pretty excellent. So we had explained that I had a book signing, the title of the book, so forth and so on. He said, "Well, where was your book signing?" And I told him it was the old French Opera House on Bourbon Street. He said, "Well, what happened to you there?" And I kind of freaked out. I looked to my friend. She looked at me. I didn't say anything. And I then said back to him, "Well, what do you think happened to me?" Point blank, no explanation, nothing. And he said, "Well, in 1919, the old French Opera House, which was the epicenter of Creole culture back, in its heyday, in 1919, December 14th, I believe, the old French Opera House had burned to the ground." And I freaked out. I still didn't tell him, this gentleman that was driving us back to our hotel at the Dupuis, what had happened. He said, "So now explain what happened to you." So right where I had the book signing, about a table this size, I don't have any words because it was unreal as to what happened to us. And the fire started right by the men's bathroom hallway on the first floor of the now hotel, which was the old French Opera House back in 1919. So, yes, it's haunted. It is also a place that has a lot of deep-seated history, a lot of culture, and the firemen didn't, get a chance to put the fire out until the next day, unfortunately. So it had burned down. So my friend turned to me, she slapped me, she said, "Hun," she said, "this is why you came to New Orleans. You have to put this in your next book." And lo and behold, I am wrapping up the manuscript to Origins, which is set in 1920s, New Orleans, and also, present day. But I am trying to weave in my very odd, spooky experiences moving forward. Kind of have to set up the fire and what happened at the old French Opera House in order to, preempt the 20s, the roaring 20s. But I am going to release it hopefully in the spring of 2020 because it's the 20s all over again, everybody. Let's get ready to party. So that is what happened to me at the old French Opera House.
Have you had any other notable spooky experiences?
Yes, so I had just explained my spooky experience at the old French Opera House. Again, it turns out that the place is certainly haunted. I can speak to that, and so can my best friend and my friend and manager, Melinda. She heard it first, and apparently I am currently weaving in my spooky experience at the old French Opera House in my upcoming novella, Voodoo Juice Origins, Cody's Story. And I would also like to share just my brief experience my other haunted spooky experience that took place in October 2018, and that was at the Maison du Puy Hotel. Again, I believe it was an old, perhaps cotton mill, maybe a grist mill in the 1800s. And the first night we arrived, well, again, we had been up since maybe 4:30, even earlier Eastern time. Then we flew to New Orleans. I landed around 10:30 a.m. Central time. Waited for my friend to arrive at the airport. So we went out all day. We went to Frenchman Street, Bourbon Street, took pictures, experienced the culture. We hadn't, been there in about 4 years to the date. So I had forgotten maybe like a wallet or a dollar bill, cash, a key, a phone. Something had been forgotten on my end the first night we arrived. And I left my friend down in the lobby to relax, to maybe have a drink, maybe take some pictures, get some information and brochures for the tours that we were going to, take that week. And I walked up, I took the elevator and I walked down the hall. And it was, it was quiet. It was a weeknight. It wasn't too bad. A little eerie, but it was an old building. I went to the room, I grabbed said item I was missing, locked the door, walked back down the hallway toward the double shaft elevators. And in between the elevators came this spirit. And I've never actually seen a spirit with my eyes before. I've seen them in photographs I took. I heard them. I've dreamt of them. I've written about them, but never actually seen a spirit. So this being, and there was about half of him. It was about 8 feet tall, dressed in late 19th century clothing. He looked dirty. He was, you could see through him, but there was only half of him. He was smoky. He was like a chalk, figure, about 8 feet tall, and he came through, the center of the double shafted elevator, system. And then he was walking, but only half of him was walking. About, I think, the right side. He was walking towards me, then down the hall. And I couldn't believe my eyes. I didn't speak to him. He didn't speak to me. He looked down at me because he is, he was taller than I am. And he looked sad. He had a top hat on, a bow around his neck, or a bow tie, but, or a rag, a vest. He looked very dirty and maybe in his 40s or 50s and just sad. And he walked right by me, just down the hallway. And that was my experience at the Maison du Puy Hotel in New Orleans.
What do you have in the works now?
Well, I'm certainly glad that you had asked. I'm working on several books at the moment. Most importantly, I'm working again on the Origins book, the second book in the series, set in 1920s. That is Voodoo Juice Origins Cody's Story. I started working on that a few years ago, and I plan on wrapping up the manuscript and self-publishing it in spring of 2020. So that I'm very excited about, working with a fantastic gentleman as the book cover model. This, for the original book, book number 1 of the trilogy that I'm evolving, is a friend of mine from South Jersey. His name is Mikey. He was fantastic for the project. I do like working with live models, having them express their sexuality, having them express their manhood, express horror, fear and spookiness on the covers. Think romance novel, but spookier. So I'm working on Origins. Cody's Story is coming out in a few months, actually, which is kind of freaking me out. It's spooking me. I'm also working on 2 other projects. Um, One is a lycanthropic Southern Gothic novel set in the 18th century, the mid 18th century, in the Carolinas, as well as in New York State. I'm weaving in kind of the legend of Sleepy Hollow and Ichabod Crane into that as well. And we're also working, on that book cover with another model. His name's Brody. He's fantastic. I really love the people that I work with on these projects. And the third one I'm working with him, another gentleman, for an 18th century, 19th century Southern Gothic vampiric novella. He lives in Louisiana, and his name is Percy. So a lot of things are happening for me right now as far as writing several books and projects. I'm working on, interviews, podcasts, and really trying to get my name out regarding being a horror author. And I love it. I really love, connecting with my horror fans in general, fans of horror lit, sci-fi, thriller. My background is in writing. I have a BA in literature. So, I can express what it means to, truly be a part of the community. So that's what I'm working on. So please follow me. I will be releasing a lot of news, namely from my website, josephafederico.com. On the update section are the articles, about who I am, my past. I am also into marketing. I'm a marketing manager, but in between the marketing content is also content about my books that are forthcoming. So thank you so much for your support.
Do you remember when you first became fascinated with the horror genre or spooky things in general?
Great question. I was about 7 or 8 when I first started reading the Goosebumps series by R.L. Stine, and that's really how I got into the horror genre, the horror lit as a child. I read Stephen King, I read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, all the classics, and R.L. Stine was also a big inspiration to me. I wrote some plays, I started to write my own novels, as a child on my old, Apple computer, the big clunky machine. But I would also say I loved Creepshow as a kid. It scared me. I grew up in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, also watching Tales from the Crypt. That was originally a comic book strip and series, but I grew up watching the show in the 90s, which freaked me out, and I carry that with me, that inspiration to this day. And I would also say, which is coming back to Nickelodeon, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Yes, I am. I would say that all the above that I just listed, are truly inspirations to me. As I got older and to be, an adult, I would say that Anne Rice, she's still a big inspiration to me in my writing currently, and hopefully in the future. And so is her fantastic son, Christopher Rice, who, I have had interviewed in the past several times, gotten his autograph. His book, Identity of Souls, is one of my favorite, Southern Gothic thrillers that I, have read about 5 times or 6 times, and I will never, ever, a million times over, not read his work. So that's what inspires me. That's what got me into the horror genre, and especially around, fall and, Halloween time is when I really try to squeeze out, what scares me the most and put it into my writing. So there you have it.
Do you have a favorite medium, be that print or film or other, for horror?
I would have to say that my favorite medium for horror would be literature and film.
Who are some of your favorite horror creators?
I would have to say that at least for literature, my favorite horror creator is certainly Anne Rice. And for film, my favorite horror creators, I guess I will list three for now. I would say certainly John Carpenter. I would have to say he's a master. Wes Craven is also king at what he does in the horror genre. And this gentleman did a really good job with recreating the world of Michael Myers in 2007, 2008, 9-ish. He's crazy. I love his music around this time of year and season. I love watching his videos. I was not a big fan as a teenager, but I certainly am as an adult. And that is Rob Zombie. He's a genius. He did fantastic things with the overarching story and, the history of Michael Myers, hands down.
What are some of your favorite horror movies?
Although I love Halloween, horror, anything spooky, haunted, dead, and otherwise, I do have other interests. I am a writer, of course, as you have been watching and learning more about me regarding, being a horror, author. But I hike. I love traveling to West Virginia, especially Harper's Ferry, with my friends to go hiking. I love craft beer and IPAs because I'm a writer. Why not, right? And then I also am a marketing manager. I run and operate and function as the CEO of a social media agency here in New Jersey. I work on marketing and social media. I work on web design, PR, and branding for companies, small, large, wide, medium, all of the above. And that's also a very big passion of mine, is namely creating branding and social media for companies.
We can't live by spooky alone. What other things captivate your interests?
That's a fantastic question as well. I would say my favorite horror movies would be the Blair Witch series, the Blair Witch Project, Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2, and the one that was released in 2016, just the Blair Witch. I would also say the Rob Zombie's Halloween movies. I would say all of the Halloween movies featuring Michael Myers, and the ones that are also not featuring Michael Myers. And I would also say Interview with the Vampire will always ring true in my soul. What a phenomenal movie that is, or that was, is, will forever be.
Have you created works in other areas beyond horror, spooky territory?
Yes, I have written other works that are not horror related. Back in 2011, I released a book through Arcadia Publishing called Galloway Township that was co-authored with my friend Matthew McHenry, and also the introduction was by Robert Lee Reed. He is the head of the Galloway Historical Society in Galloway, New Jersey and South Jersey. So that took about 4 years to write and research, and then we spent another 2 or 3 years on a press tour in South Jersey for that book. That's currently available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and there's also an ebook if you would like to purchase that. And also, of course, through arcadiapublishing.com. So it sold out its first day on Amazon, which was fantastic. But that's actually what prompted me to start my own publishing company. So, long story short.
If you could sit down to dinner with any 3 people, living or dead, with whom would you be dining, and what would be on the menu?
You know what? What a great question that is. I would have to say George Washington would be the first person I would like to have dinner with. We would have a turkey and chicken pie that he used to make for his staff and his guests around the Christmas time, the Christmas season. I've made it myself. It's delicious. I would like to share that with him. I would have to say Marie Antoinette. I would like to have French pastries with her at Versailles. And I would also say I would like to have dinner with Giles Corey from Salem, out of all weird, strange, and spooky places. I would like to have maybe just cornbread, like a really good homemade cornbread and thick butter and a really strong cup of coffee with Giles, and talk about the Salem witch trials together. That would be fantastic. I would love that entire meal.
What else would you like the viewers to know about that we haven't touched on in this interview?
I think we touched upon everything there is to know about me as an author and publisher and marketer and hiker and lover of the spooky in the world. But I would say two things we didn't really touch upon. I love the South. I would say, as you could tell, but we really didn't delve into that. So I love the South, namely the Carolinas, namely New Orleans. I'd love to go to Georgia, learn about their culture. I'm also a historian. I'm working on research for a Gullah Geechee book that's coming out, Lord knows when. But that's very important to me to preserve history, especially history that may be dark to our country, and to bring light to that and why it happened and how to prevent it. And I also would say that I love Lipton's iced tea. So, like the iced tea mix. So I'm a little quirky as well. So thank you so much for your time, for learning more about me. If you would like to learn even more about me, as I had mentioned before, please head to josephafederico.com. Send me a message. We'll talk soon. Thanks so much.
Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.